Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center. My name is Quentin Ring. I'm Beyond Baroque's executive director. It is National Poetry Month. This weekend is the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books. And we have a fabulous reading here tonight for you. We have Jacqueline Osherow with us, as well as Los Angeles' own poet laureate, Lynne Thompson. Yes. Very excited about this evening. It's going to be great. We'll get to the program in just a minute. I did want to start our evening by acknowledging Beyond Baroque's presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. We acknowledge the wrong done to these peoples through settler colonialism, genocidal practices, and the violent dispossession of their land. And as an arts organization, we are committed to uplifting Indigenous writers, their communities, and their art. For those of you who are new to the space, Beyond Baroque is very much a place for everyone dedicated to the artistic possibilities of language. It's a space for writers, for artists, for readers, and really above all, poets. We were founded in 1968 by George Drury Smith, and over the past 55 years, it is our 55th anniversary, we've nurtured Los Angeles literature through our readings, workshops, exhibitions, archiving, and community building. We have programming going on here pretty much every weekend. Really great slate of things coming up. We're going to close National Poetry Month next weekend with the second annual International Poetry Film Festival. That's, I think, has something like 43 films from 13 countries. It starts on Friday. There's a new documentary on Ruth Weiss we're gonna screen on Friday night. And then on Saturday, there'll just be a slew of films and some panels as well. So please come back for that. We're very excited about that. And then in May, we'll have a whole bunch more programming. We've got a really great workshop coming up with Diana Coy Gwynn. I think that's later in May. We've got several readings. So please do check out our website to get the full rundown. We think it's going to be really a special month as well. And please do also show your support of our programming by becoming a member or renewing your membership. We really depend on our members' donations to underwrite pretty much everything we do here. It helps keep programs like this free. If we do have to charge, if you're a member, you will get in for free as well or get a significant discount. So really thank you to all of you who are members or who support us. We really do appreciate it. And also a big thank you to our staff tonight as well. Eric Alberg is in the booth, Jimmy Vega and Catherine King in the bookstore. They keep this place running. Yes. Above all, thank you to our readers as well, Jackie and Lynn, and to David St. John for hosting this. He's going to be introducing Jackie and Lynn in just a second. I will say later in May, David will be moving, in my view, regrettably. I'm sure he's happy about it, from Los Angeles. I think we're going to have a little bit of a going away reading for him and Anna as well. So please stay tuned for those details. But show your support of our authors as well by buying their books in the bookstore. We have their books up. A lot of our books are packed up to go to the LA Times Festival book tomorrow. So make sure you get their books. But if not, we'll see you at the festival. So that's about it. I just want to bring David up to introduce our wonderful poets. And thank you all so much for being here. And please, everyone, welcome David St. John.
Well, it's, when I first moved to Venice in 1987, I'd already known about Beyond Baroque. And it's always been a part of my daily life and my life as a writer in this community. And I just can't say enough about what this place has been able to be for everyone and all the poets, but also how extraordinary Quentin's been. And it's something that, it's easy to take for granted the number of programs, but what's happened is that Quentin's also diversified the programming and really made it open in a way that I think has been extraordinarily important. It's such a pleasure for me to be able to be here tonight and to welcome you to this reading with Lynne Thompson and Jackie Osherow. I'm going to introduce them individually, and Lynne is going to read first. And this gives me an opportunity, of course, to talk about one of my dearest friends, someone, of course, who has been, as Quentin said, the Los Angeles Poet Laureate, and also a figure of intelligence and compassion and empathy and wicked humor, and always someone who is there for her fellow writers. And as the author of 3 extraordinary books of poems, and also someone whose new book, which is called Blue on a Blue Palette, will be coming out in 2024 from Boa Editions. You'll need to stay alert for those readings. And we'll hear some of those poems tonight. They're extraordinary new poems. You know her books, Beg No Pardon, and Fretwork and Start with a Small Guitar. And Blue on a Blue Palette moves back into some of the family materials that Lynne has always worked with. But there's also a kind of resonance that goes beyond the individual to something that is, and this is something when I began hearing these poems, these new poems, there's something almost mythic about their interiors, as well as being both socially aware and personally intimate. And she's just one of my favorite people in the whole world. So please welcome Lynne Thompson.
David always makes me sound so wonderful. I should really have recorded that, because I could probably use it on the back of the new book. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's a real treat to be able to read with Jackie tonight. I've been looking forward to it for quite a while. And I'm going to dive right into the poems, but I want to start by saying the first 4 poems that I'm going to read, I particularly dedicate to David. I can't stand up here and talk about his leaving Los Angeles without being verklempt, because he has been a mainstay for so many of us for so long, that it's a little unimaginable that he won't physically be here, although thanks to Zoom and other technologies, I'm sure we'll all be able to stay in touch with him, although I'm sure he'd like to have not so many people stay in touch with him. but certainly Beg No Pardon and Start with a Small Guitar would not have existed without his encouragement, his support, his, he had that right balance of saying go for it and saying, but I don't really want to get involved in how that works. But he just believed in the poems and believed in me. And these are dedicated to you, David. These first 2 from Beg No Pardon. Lip of the world. You may think you want to die. Your best lover leaves. Cool cash comes up short, and God is living in another state. But you do not, or even if you do, your calves and thighs, heart and breasts and sinew do not. Once, in the Grand Canyon's belly, I learned this lesson. 1 mile down as the crow flies, but for 7 switchback miles, all vertical, I was sure I was a goner. I couldn't think of family or tomorrow, or that yesterday life had been easy go and a fish fry. But I looked up, and there was the lip of the world. and I grabbed on. True story. I said, what is up? Ballad for Yesterdays. Buzzing like a hawk over high cotton in a trance, I saw you, where human lust is electrical, all gyration and heartbreak, a July'd moon and sun. Drowsy with beauty, we spooned in sweet fallow fields, so which of us is more mad? Or is this melancholy just a corn cob dipped in red rue? Still, we were lovebirds. Perhaps we invented our own jazz. Sweets, we were morning's glitter. And yes, there were afternoons of scat, of bebop. But there is no loving that won't splinter from itself, and we know time is just a honey dripper. Yet I'm all dreams and hunger all these years later. And a couple from Start with a Small Guitar. Note left on the bedpost for my ordinary Icarus. From more than my balcony, you leap, patchouli on air, him like a wheel, a fiction turned hurricane on an atoll. You are ever young, hair slicked from your temples. You are color and no color and a pyre and more harming than harmed. I'll be sleeping when you come, fish bait, skim over sheer water. Leave the letter you promised, precious between the blue of its syllables, brine in its crease. Place its weight on my temple, my strange quicksilver birdie. A friend of mine and David's and Patricia's, Candace calls this my book of love, no love bones. And because David said I was wickedly humorous, I guess I'll read this one. Optimist's Requiem. Foolish fool, fool-proof fool, queen of foolhardy fools, fool for the long, foolish hauls, although mama didn't raise no fools, isn't part of my lexicon, and having a lexicon is one reason I'm such a fool. I've been fooled 59 times and never fooled a single soul. I've been a fast car fool, a fool for fool's gold, an American fool, and I've volunteered everywhere that wants one. Seems I'm not interested in anything else. I think I want fool etched on my forehead. Was a time when being a fool was a slip I could have slipped out of, but that was 40 slips ago. Now fool is tattooed on my tattoos as I sit at the table eating beans and more beans. A farting fool, that's me. I won't think of desire or anything that might turn me optimistic. It's not going to happen. I'll forget how buttons button, get the cancer and die and still be thinking, maybe. Did you see that? Did it look like love? So those are for my good friend. And so I'm going to read a few poems from the new manuscript, Blue on a Blue Palette. The publishers told me the other day, you need to write a paragraph about what the book is about. And I said, you have the poems. I mean, does that not work? And they said, no, we really. And it really is in part about family, but also about the journey of a woman and of all women that is so perilous in this time when women seem to be reduced in status. And it's also a little bit of a travelogue. So it's physical travel, geographical travel, metaphorical travel, all of the above. So I will read a few poems from that. Self-portrait as last year, when I was unarticulated as mountains or months, where there were electronic takeovers instead of I loved once. I am delayed, as in the end of worlds, the end being the beginning of fissure, my body increasingly indistinct. Speaking of the body, what I said of it also goes for religion, its rituals, and insistent, inconstant. Ditto yellow, blue, the bitter of Brussels sprouts, and the sizzle of hot jazz growing ever more faint. But be sure, the usual suspects, family, other enemies, political ministers, the seeping orb can look me up in the funny papers. Because you can't forget me, write this down. Echo, snowmelt, suchness. This poem, you might not be able to see from afar, but it's a poem where the title is footnoted. And so the poem is in the footnotes. Just, poets, we like to play and have fun. An untamed rebel resists Octavio Armand's sonetto, consisting of 14 lines, each asserting "Yo soy un hombre sincero." Since the dawn of tadpoles in the bog, before the gleam radiating from your mother's eye, somewhere between hone and honey, and he never knew what hit him, is everything that makes the orb revolve. Everything has evolved from singularity more than individuality, which is nothing less than a woman who is nothing if not true, the mirror reflection of everything that is the inverse of woman, she who is anti-meridian, una mujer, woman, an antonym for a man by any other name. And that's been true since the dawn of tadpoles, honey. Call it havoc. If anybody is listening closely, this is an abecedarian. And all that means for people that aren't familiar with that term is that each successive line of the poem is a successive letter of the alphabet. Call it havoc, as every step you take is clutch and coffin. Believe me, baby bent on starshine, you're crazy if you think you can get away by train. Doubt is your best, depend upon it, especially when it was only a few days ago when you cast bread with glee and hope on a mirage. Here's a newsflash. We're all chumps who ignore the fact we live in cities of the already dead. Justice, just a fairy tale. Kingdoms bellicose, lovesick in these times of unloving. Yes, we're all mules. We are freak shows with mechanical limbs, neither owners nor mortgagees. On our rutted cheeks, the war paint of civilizations we never quite remember. So we pump the trombone, ziff the zithers, twirl amidst the ashes and tractor parts. Under a mad magnificence, our violence spans centuries, wreaks havoc in suddenly shuttered towns, Jinzin, Zawiya, Khartoum, and you already know what else will be lost. The River Zuni's blue head suckers, lifeless in this sag of bedrock. And that's certainly cheery. You can kind of tell what kind of mood you're in by the poems that come out. This poem is the newest of the collection. David, I don't think you've heard this yet, but I like to write centos, and cento simply means, or cento, depending on who you ask. You're Italian, or you know Italian people, you'll have to tell me. But it merely means patchwork or quilt, and you take lines of other poets and recombine them to make a new poem. So this one is relying on the work of the wildly crazy imaginative Diane Seuss and Terence Hayes. Frankly, when asked about the autonomy of my body, I consider my inner assassin, as inside me is a black-eyed animal, the umbilicus from which everything originates. I have no origin story. Unburdened by conscience like a baby, the umbilicus from which everything originates. I wonder if Jesus wants souls like the devil does, unburdened by conscience like a baby, the list of pallbearers still in a drawer somewhere. I wonder if shapeshifters want souls like devils do, the hinges turning, the list of pallbearers still in a drawer somewhere, an existential jambalaya, their hinges turning, a clamor of voltas or some existential jambalaya. My only fear, my fear of a virtuous mob, a clamor of voltas shaped like a silver tongue. My deepest fears, a virtuous mob of mother wit and mother woe. Shaped like silver tongues, I have no origin story of mother wit and mother woe. Inside me is a black-eyed animal. My friend there. This poem's title comes from the book of Zechariah in the King James Version of the Bible, chapter 14, verse 8. And it shall be in that day that living waters shall go out. The sea is over the moon. The sea is William Grant still and sorry with our bones. The sea doesn't get to vote, and mothers will always miss their daughter seas. Sea's Galapagos damsels are no more, so sea will call you out and take you down, and she ain't no river Styx, which is why sea is not as blue as you and I are. Sea, the snot green sea, the scrotum tightening sea, makes sea unsure who she can trust. Sea of Japan, Sea of Azov, Sea of Crete, Caribbean, Solomon. See the sea divided by what men call gyres. See the sea united by mollusks, barnacles, crabs. Sea isn't the will of the people. Sea cannot stop, but sea can dry up until she remembers she is sea, separate on the surface but connected in the deep. Sea horse, sea lion, sea anemone. Sea has an attitude. Sea is waiting for her Nobel Prize and has a nasty habit. No survivors. Sea will swallow your ships.
Yes, yes.
Once we were rivers. This poem has an epigraph by W.E.B. Du Bois. Would America have been America without her Negro people? But is this the last of us? Gone the mean barracoon, gone the deep, wide rivers of us. No more roosters or pickled pig's feet, no Aretha or respect. Is this the last of us? Are African less African and gone? Are tap less Bojangles, Hines and gone? Gone the deep, wide rivers of us, and gone too our faith and fidelity to the Betsy Ross stitch. And Martin, was he the last of us? And Malcolm, Harriet, Barbara Jordan, all gone. Who remains to pray for the deep, wide rivers of us? Gone our song and its shadow, gone the tongue of the gullah, gone the deep, wide rivers of us. Is this the last of us? You can't really believe that. You've been seeing the last of us for a long time come. Come first the black women and their people, Amina of Zaria, Anna D'Souza Nzinga, Nandi. Then come the transatlantic traders sailing from Luanda, Malembo, Sierra Leone, landing Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Kitts, landing the Carolinas, Virginia, New York. Come then the black men running, too many slave named like my great-great-great-grandfather George, Fred Douglass. This is not too old a story. See Emmett Till, Harry Moore, 4 dead girls in an Alabama church. Some say Only a few bad rogues, but today's cops just like yesterday's patty rollers. Shot Stephon Clark, shot Danny Ray Thomas, shot Antoine Rose II, shot Deontay Yarber. All of them unarmed. And all of this in the year of whose Lord? 2018. So we fight for the last of us, even fight each other. Ali Boumier! But then we hear the kora, the talking drum, the balafon and marimba, and Josephine Baker heard them, and Jacob Lawrence heard them, and Toni Morrison heard them, and Jesse Owens running heard the drums that turned the Arthur Ashe racket into a drum, the diplomacy of Ralph Bunche into a drum, the demand of Ida B. Wells into a drum. Like Basquiat's obnoxious liberals was a drum, like Harriet Powers' quilting was a drum, like a LeBron James dunk is a drum, and didn't Father Curry preach in the Church of England like a drum those lords and ladies had never heard before? So they know, as you know, there will never be a last of us. See the Justins of Tennessee. We come like rivers. And I would read just two more. This is also a cento, but this is all Langston Hughes. Langston won't stay in his grave, calls me rose of neon darkness, calls himself early blue evening, black smoke of sound, says we are related, you and I, reminds me we are wandering in the dusk, our faces a chocolate bar, facing the night of two moons. And though I'm a lonely little question mark, he laughs. Life is for the living with gypsies and sailors. Till the old junk man death plants your feet in the cool swamp mud, shake your brown feet, honey. Wander through this living world. Get out the lunchbox of your dreams. Stay awake all night with loving or be a woman in the doorway. Death don't ring no doorbells or say, here is that sleeping place, as if it were some noble thing. Think how thin and sharp the moon is tonight. Don't mind dying, veiling what darkness hides. Haunt, like mystery, like a naked bone in gumbo. Nod at the sun. Thank you for listening. I'll close with this one. I wrote this to cheer myself up. It will be obvious why. A woman's body, aging, still loves itself, kisses the air that surrounds it, loves the lips in full pout, famous birthplace of all kisses. The belly, brown, round, kisses its inverted button, and the shoulders, oh, how I kiss my shoulders. My nose kissing lilies and a purply night sky. My neck, long as forever, fit for 20,000 kisses. 20,000 kisses for each cocoa breast and nipple. For the lower arms that encircle each other, then kiss. Kiss. Even the ears, French kissing to tunes of Django and Debussy. The upper arms wishing to kiss their tender underarms. Thread of both hands kissing the lifeline. And my cheeks colored bronze with kisses. Lashes that kiss my eyes, that kiss everything they see. My forehead, a map of places where kisses live long, long live my kinky hair braided with kiss after kiss after kiss. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynne, for yet another amazing reading. I want to say a couple of things about Jackie Osherow's work. I first read Jackie's poems in her very first collection of poems called Looking for Angels in New York. And a friend had told me about her poems. And also the poet Richard Howard had told me about her poems, Mark Strand, my good friend Larry Levis. And one of the things that was really extraordinary to me is something that has continued in all of her work. This new book, Divine Ratios, is her 9th collection of poems. The book before this book, which is called My Look-alike at the Krishna Temple, I thought it's not going to get any better than that, ever, in terms of a kind of melding of meditation, music, formal grace and intelligence, a sense of moral vision and commitment to a kind of sense of justice in the world, to an understanding of what faith is and disappointment. And she's also one of the most exquisite formal exponents and singers in our poetry, whether it's a sequence of villanelles in this book, whether it's extraordinary use of terza rima, the sonnets. One of the things that, as I was talking yesterday about her work, is every time I read Jackie Osherow's poems, I'm reminded that the urgent element in all formal poetry, in all of the forms that have come through different languages, is the element of song. And whether it's supplication, whether it's astonishment, whether it's the kind of gathering of community, that song in poems, it's the music that persuades us. That argument is excellent in essays. But song in poetry moves beneath our consciousness in some ways, that allows us to trust the voice of the singer singing the song. And no one in our recent poetry has questioned both the elements of cultural construction across the centuries and their accomplishments, their grace, and also their disappointments in terms of human activities, as well as human gorgeous endeavor and love. And this book of Divine Ratios is itself a kind of book of songs. So here's Jackie Osherow.
Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you so much, Lynn. That was just terrific. I love those poems. I love listening to them. It's been a great pleasure to be here, to be hosted by such a fabulous host. Okay, well, I'm going to start by reading some of the villanelles from the sequence of villanelles about China in this book, Divine Ratios. And I just will say that there are some quotations, mostly from Li Bai, from Wan Shijur. I think you're going to recognize that they're quotations. I can't bring myself to do the air quote thing, so I'm hoping you'll recognize them. I'll just read some of these. So I'll start with the first one. 1, Suzhou Garden, February. In the putting a question to the spring pavilion, I put a question to the spring. She answers plum blossom, bamboo, pine. To me, it's a fairly burning question. How do you bear it all winter long? But the putting a question to the spring pavilion simply redirects my line of vision outward past its eaves toward a flourishing of plum blossom, bamboo, and pine. The 3 friends of winter, or so they're known in ancient poems, paintings, February's beginning, but near the putting a question to the spring pavilion, clustered needles, daggers, green on green, and petals on spare gray branches opening, plum blossom, bamboo, and pine. Could I survive a bitter season? What 3 friends would blunt its sting? I put questions to the spring in her pavilion. She asks the plum blossom, bamboo, pine. 2, at Yoyang Tower. Water, sky, one color. My daughter tries to translate on the fly. She says the poem's by Li Bai, 8 characters. She makes out 4. Water, sky, one color. What might the other 4 words be? We've made a pilgrimage to Yoyang Tower. My daughter tries to translate on the fly. Poor Dufu has to hold the rail and cry in his climbing Yoyang Tower. It too has water and sky. He's on a boat, old and ill and lonely. I never find the poem. Did she mistake the author? My daughter tries to translate on the fly. Still, except for a cement barge, behind me, lake and sky are one consistent silver. My daughter tries to translate on the fly. One color, water, sky. Here's 5, the Orchid Pavilion Gathering, 353 CE. A wine cup in a swirling, splashing stream. Poets along both banks, the Orchid Pavilion. Whoever it reached would drink and write a poem. The calligrapher Wang Shijur recalled the game in his preface from the Orchid Pavilion. Lofty peaks, luxuriant trees, the swirling stream. It was buried with an emperor in his tomb. We only have copies, but they too stun with the ever out of reach, the waylaid poem escaped as brushstroke, ideogram. Scroll after scroll depicts the scene. Drunken poets sprawled along the stream, each waiting for the cup to come to him, some greedily and some in desperation. Who is ever sure to reach a poem? When future generations recall my time, they'll feel what I feel about generations gone. A wine cup in a swirling, splashing stream. Whoever it reaches drinks and writes a poem. This is Datong, Yugang Grottos, 6. Overwhelmed, I wonder, can I see this? The world has turned unreadable, too vast. cliffs of grottos carved with giant Buddhas and their tiny, endless entourage, believers, flora, fauna, hint at all I've missed, coming as I have, too late to see this on its own terms. My useless compass, Florence, Michelangelo, the West, has, for grottos carved with giant Buddhas, no known coordinates. I grasp at likeness. This curve of vine or antler might have graced a Romanesque altar. It's how I see this. Then I learn such sculpture came to the Chinese from India, where Alexander, pressing east, had introduced it, that giant Buddhas and Romanesque altars share one source. The world's small again. We all can see this. In Umbria, right now, a Chinese tourist finds on slender crosses sad, gaunt Buddhas. This is 11, Shanghai Taxi. My daughter teaches us to recite a poem in Chinese, a poem all school children learn. Li Bai, bright moonlight, frost, missing home. It's for the teacher who taught her the poem. We practice in the taxi to the station. Everyone in China can recite this poem. Our driver, stunned, joins in, has us mimic him. Slowly, he exaggerates each tone. Bright moonlight, frost on the ground, missing home. He laughs and laughs, amused by our game, while I'm trying, impossible, to imagine all my countrymen united by a poem. Though once a cab driver recited Omar Khayyam all the way from the Salt Lake airport in Persian when I told him what I do, he missed home. And my father-in-law could reel off every psalm in Hebrew, a brief shtetl education. The sun will not smite, or the moon, help will come. How can we sing God's song away from home? 13, return to Suzhou, master of the nets. It was meant to conjure the life of a fisherman, solitude, simplicity, and peace, hence the name, Master of the Net's Garden. Not the real life, of course, but what a nobleman, who else would bankroll such quiet grace, imagines when he thinks life of a fisherman. The sea in miniature, harnessed, halcyon, abundant fish, giant koi, not bass. It's a stand-in wilderness, a Chinese garden. Each tree a forest, each rock a mountain, for those obliged to keep close to the house. There are even breaking waves. Our would-be fishermen could watch from covered walkways a procession of ripples launched across his fish pond's surface by pelting raindrops. His master gardener dispensed perfection even in the rain. I visit in the downpour, paradise. While out on open sea, a master fisherman expands itself his garden, plies his nets. 15, English Library, Yali School, Changsha, Hunan Province. The Yellow River begins in heaven, a student recites at my daughter's school. Its waters run to the sea and never return. I've asked for a poem. She offers this one in Chinese, then English. Her translation's simple. The ancients, she says, thought rivers began in heaven. Don't they? But I'm too amazed to listen. We have the same words, I say, in our ancient Bible. All the rivers run to the sea, but ours return. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 7. All the rivers run to the sea, yet the sea is not full. They return to the place they began. Can he mean heaven? In the meantime, I find her poem, Li Bai, Drunk Again. Ecclesiastes might just mean nature's cyclical. There's nothing new under the sun. All things return. His solution, eat, drink, and be merry. Li Bai's, more wine. He's got a fine horse and furs he's willing to sell. They're locked in a drunken shouting match in heaven. They return. They never return, never return. 16, epilogue, back home. I'm left now with the poems. They're Chinese pure after echo, thunder chasing lightning, unrelenting pressure, then release. You have to dream reading translations, otherwise they're closed to you. A bowstring tightening behind an arrow. That's how I hear Chinese, and then let fly all speed and thwack and hiss. Did I travel there or just read the writing? Unrelenting pressure, then release. As children, we would count the seconds, freeze, tensing for the thunder after lightning. Each second meant a mile, but in Chinese, no time elapses. Each tone is endless. Bai Juyi, Du Fu, Li Bai, they're still writing. Unrelenting pressure, then release. And I'm still chasing whatever it is that infiltrates an instant, turns it loose, with repercussions lasting, spreading, widening, like ripples in a pond, the pond's Chinese. Unrelenting pressure, then release. I always like to read one new poem, so I'll read a new sonnet. Okay, so this is citing. There it was, hogging a huge swath of street, twice as long as the Civic parked beside it, relic of the jaunty middle century into which lucky you and I were born, when no one thought of limits to Earth's bounty. White with red leather upholstery, red instrument panel, red steering wheel, a finned, preening Cadillac Seville, top down, as if to lure me in. I half thought you would show up with the key. If anything could have brought you home, it would have been that swank, outlandish car. Were you still alive then? I'm not sure. But I know I waited. You didn't come. I'll just read one more poem, but it is not short. This is, I should say, I was awfully lucky. I was asked some years ago, just a couple of years ago, when it was the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service, they asked a poet from every state to write a poem about a national park, and I'm from Utah. I got the best gig by a long shot. And frankly, they did me a gigantic favor because really Bryce Canyon, I hope you've been there. Teresa, I know you love it. Bryce Canyon does not need my poem. But the Academy of American Poets did, so I wrote it. And it was really a thrill. So here it is. Inspiration Point, Bryce Canyon, Utah. Maybe it was just for this that God pulled water from dry land to rescue hoodoo after hoodoo. That's what they're called, a bastardization of voodoo, these unrepeatable needles of rock, geology's answer to flakes of snow. A sound enough hypothesis, dark magic. But I like God's approach, so straightforward. The light, the land, the sky, each feat of handiwork, a matter of a single uttered word. That's the first version. The clumsy second was more hands-on, with dust and ribs required. Though it's a stretch to claim this place was planned. Maybe just like us, God was stupefied. He rarely knew how any day would end, had to see things finished to call them good. Here, he might even have done without the bric-a-brac of the days that followed, except the fourth days, bodies of light, essential for the colors of the stone, the greater light, especially adroit. Just watch it nurse a puny flame at dawn, purple with an edging of vermilion, by sunrise to a full-fledged conflagration, then temper it to golden rose by noon, darker still as day begins to fail. The oranges go bronze, the reds maroon, the whole place solid indigo by nightfall, except on nights when a full or near full moon applies its inlay, mother of pearl, on a lamina of coral and carnelian. Or the moon's a no-show, no stone visible, just black on black, spikes and spires gone. That's when you look up. The sky's grand central, no light pollution, no clouds, conditions ideal, rush hours, hubbub irresistible, the stars, its thronged commuters, cheek by jowl. The park has telescopes. I once saw Jupiter, but I prefer an open free-for-all, the peripheral inkling of a meteor, or was that a satellite or diving owl? Some flora and fauna did make their way here eventually, swashbucklers all, rattlesnake, manzanita, prickly pear, its shock of blossoms at the end of April, slow-motion fireworks, the canyon floor lost beneath magentas, yellows, reds, or bristlecone pine launching spectacular high-wire acrobatics off the cliffside, where that gifted horticulturist, the nuthatch, a glutton for its seeds, disseminates them when it stops to rest. Quite ingenious of God, if oddly fanciful, for so inveterate a fatalist. That is, if God's mixed up in this at all. The park prefers the Paiutes explanation. The hoodoos were once the legend people, shapeshifters native to this region, turned for some unnameable transgression by vigilant coyote into stone, their face paint still intact, their tradition of shape-shifting now upheld in unison, a non-stop frenzy of dissimulation. Now a storm-tossed, now a tranquil ocean, flocked by scarlet ibis, pink flamingos, now dreamscape, now valley of the moon, now ransacked cathedrals, lost rose windows, now an amphitheater's hushed proscenium, now leafless aspens, elms, catalpas, willows, now phantom hollyhock, delphinium, now flashback, now panicked premonition, now truce, now skirmish, now pandemonium, now parachutes, a daredevil battalion floating toward an ill-fated attack, now blushing debutantes, their first cotillion, now parched oasis, now bivouac, close by each golden tent, a golden torch, now red-robed Russian choirs, now ecstatic ovations from thick stands of golden birch, now burnished temple, now tarnished city, now bands of acolytes in mosque, in church, or here assembling legends of coyote, scrambling to get down on their untried knees and thank someone, anyone, for all this beauty. Though maybe it's the frost they ought to praise, the real creator, according to science, how it would melt and freeze, and then, in a matter of mere eons, no wind involved, windy as it is, chisel what must be Earth's most flimsy stone, limestone, siltstone, mudstone, into this. Not surprising, really, when you think what frost can achieve in seconds on a pane of glass. Always a revelation when a miniaturist takes his genius for precision large scale. The landscape behind the mystic lamb as Christ in the Ghent altarpiece, for example, an exhaustive primer of floral specimens rendered in botanical detail. Art both mainstay and intimate of science. Think Leonardo and science of art. What fools we were to leave the Renaissance behind us, to tear ourselves apart into more and more obscure specialization. Not that it matters here. Science and art, even in conjunction with their on-again, off-again Confederate religion, are speechless in the presence of this canyon. Even God needs two versions of creation at the start of Genesis. Some things defy a single overarching explanation. Maybe everything does, if you look carefully. And what's a day exactly when the sun hasn't yet been added to the sky? That third day might still be going on. Everything I'm staring at still raw. God on overdrive. The frost a madman, consumed by each imaginary flaw. Am I a witness? An alibi? A spy? And what's this delirium, this terror, this awe? Is the sky hallucinating? Am I? Inspiration Point, Bryce Canyon, Utah. Just let me stand here with an open eye. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, David. And thank you, everyone, for coming. Please stick around for a little while, buy some books, hang out, and enjoy the evening. Thanks so much.
Thank you.